no elected office, no printing press, no army at his command. Yet in the autumn of 1907, one man sat down at a desk, locked a door, and quite literally saved the American economy from total collapse. Who was he? The most powerful private citizen in the history of the United States. His name was John Pierpont Morgan, and this is the story of how a 70-year-old banker did what the entire federal government couldn't. To understand why 1907 happened, you first have to understand what America looked like in the years leading up to it. The early 20th century was a gilded, giddy time. The Industrial Revolution had transformed the United States into the wealthiest nation on earth, and everyone, from Wall Street titans to small-town shopkeepers, wanted a piece of the boom. Banks were lending aggressively. Trust companies, the loosely regulated financial cousins of traditional banks, were doing even more so. And critically, there was no central bank, no Federal Reserve, no lender of last resort. If things went wrong, there was no safety net, just the cold mathematics of panic. And things were about to go very, very wrong. It started, as so many financial disasters do, with a bet gone bad. In October 1907, a group of speculators led by a man named F. Augustus Hines attempted to corner the market on the stock of United Copper Company. The plan was simple in theory: buy up enough shares to control the price, force short sellers to buy back at inflated rates, and walk away rich. In practice, it was a catastrophe. The corner failed spectacularly within days. Hines's brokerages collapsed, and the damage spread like ink through water. The problem was that Hines was connected, financially, socially, institutionally, to a web of banks and trust companies across New York City. When his name turned toxic, so did everything it touched. Depositors at the Knickerbocker Trust Company, one of New York's largest, began to panic. They'd heard whispers that the Knickerbocker's president, Charles Barney, was linked to Hines's failed scheme. On the morning of October 22, 1907, they arrived at the Knickerbocker's doors not to deposit money, but to take it all out. Right now, what followed was a textbook bank run, except there was nothing textbook about the scale. Thousands of people queued around the block, desperate to withdraw their savings before the Knickerbocker ran dry. Within hours, the bank suspended payments. The news ricocheted across the city. If the Knickerbocker could fall, who was next? The Trust Company of America began experiencing runs of its own. Then the Lincoln Trust, panic as it always does, fed on itself. This is the moment where J.P. Morgan enters the story, and it is nothing short of remarkable. By 1907, Morgan was a living monument. He had reorganized the American railroads. He had formed U.S. Steel, the first billion-dollar corporation in history. He had personally bailed out the U.S. government during the gold crisis of 1895, when President Grover Cleveland came to him, hat in hand, because the federal treasury was nearly empty. Morgan had provided $35 million in gold bonds to stabilize the country, a transaction that made him powerful, admired, and deeply controversial in equal measure. His critics accused him of holding the government hostage to private profit. His admirers called him the only man in America who could get things done. In 1907, both camps were right. When the panic erupted, Morgan was attending an Episcopal convention in Richmond, Virginia. He returned to New York immediately, summoned the most powerful bankers in the city to his private library on 36th Street, and took charge. That library, a stunning Renaissance-style building filled with art and rare manuscripts, became the unofficial headquarters of the American financial system for the next several weeks. Morgan barely slept. He played solitaire between meetings to keep his mind sharp, smoked cigars, reviewed balance sheets, and moved hundreds of millions of dollars with nothing more than a word. His first order of business was triage, which institutions were genuinely solvent but temporarily illiquid, meaning fundamentally healthy but needing breathing room, and which were truly insolvent, beyond saving and better left to fail. This distinction, brutal as it sounds, was essential. Throwing money at a hopelessly insolvent bank doesn't rescue the system. It wastes the resources needed to save the institutions that actually can be pulled back from the edge. Morgan concluded that the Trust Company of America was worth saving. He organized a pool of funds from the major banks and injected liquidity directly into the institution, stemming the run by the narrowest of margins. Then came an even more dramatic moment. The New York Stock Exchange itself began teetering. Brokerage firms couldn't secure the short-term loans they needed to function, and the exchange's president came to Morgan begging for $25 million within 10 minutes or trading would have to be suspended entirely. Morgan assembled the funds in under 15 minutes. Think about that for a moment. $25 million. 15 minutes. No committee. No congressional approval. No press release. Just one man's authority, his relationships, and the absolute trust that every banker in that room placed in his word. Still, Morgan wasn't finished. New York City itself was running low on funds and couldn't meet its own obligations. Morgan helped organize a bond purchase that kept the city solvent. He also confronted one of the most agonizing decisions of the entire episode. U.S. Steel, his own creation, was given the opportunity to acquire the Tennessee Coal, Iron, and Railroad Company, a purchase that would normally have triggered antitrust scrutiny under President Theodore Roosevelt. Morgan sent emissaries to Washington before sunrise to ask Roosevelt's permission. Roosevelt, grasping the severity of the moment, stood aside. The acquisition went through. The bank holding Tennessee Coal stock as collateral was saved, and another domino in the chain was steadied. By early November, the worst had passed. The panic of 1907 had lasted barely 3 weeks. Compared to what it might have been, a full-scale collapse of the American banking system, a depression of catastrophic proportions, the damage was contained. Not because the government acted decisively, didn't, but because one private citizen, drawing on 6 decades of financial experience, an unmatched network of relationships, and a willpower that refused to yield to chaos, had held the line almost entirely on his own. The aftermath, though, was seismic, and not in the way Morgan might have hoped. Rather than celebrating him as a hero, much of the country recoiled at what his intervention had revealed. If one unelected man could marshal that much power in a crisis, what did that say about American democracy? What did it say about the structure of the financial system itself? Congress launched an investigation, the Pujo Committee hearings of 1912, that exposed the extraordinary concentration of financial power in the hands of a very small group of men, Morgan chief among them. The hearings shook him deeply. He died in Rome in March of 1913, at the age of 75, just months after testifying. The legacy, though, outlived him by a century and counting. The very panic that Morgan had smothered with his bare hands provided the intellectual and political fuel for the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, signed into law the very same year he died. The Fed was, in essence, an institutional attempt to do permanently and publicly what Morgan had done temporarily and privately, to create a lender of last resort that didn't depend on the health, the willingness, or the mortality of a single extraordinary man. There is a quiet irony buried in all of this. The crisis that proved one man could save the financial system was the very event that ensured no single man would ever have to again. J.P. Morgan, the silent architect, had built the strongest possible case for his own replacement. Power, it turns out, doesn't always look like a title or a uniform. Sometimes it looks like a 70-year-old man playing solitaire in his library at midnight, calmly deciding the fate of the American economy, and getting it right. The legacy, though, outlived him by a century and counting. The very panic that J.P. Morgan had smothered with his bare hands provided the intellectual and political fuel for the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, signed into law the very same year he died. The Fed was, in essence, an institutional attempt to do permanently and publicly what Morgan had done temporarily and privately, to create a lender of last resort that didn't depend on the health, the willingness, or the mortality of a single extraordinary man. But it was also something more than that. It was a recognition, almost an admission, that the system itself had been fragile by design. That for all its wealth and power, the American economy had been resting on a foundation that could crack under pressure, unless someone like Morgan was there to hold it together. In the years that followed, economists, politicians and historians would return again and again to the events of 1907, dissecting every decision, every risk, every moment of hesitation. Could the crisis have been prevented? Was Morgan's intervention a rescue, or merely a postponement of deeper structural problems? And perhaps most importantly, was it acceptable for so much power to be concentrated in the hands of one private individual, no matter how capable he proved to be in that moment? These questions didn't fade with time. They became more relevant with each new financial crisis that followed, from the Great Depression to the turmoil of modern markets. In many ways, 1907 became a blueprint, not just for crisis management, but for understanding the delicate balance between private influence and public responsibility. It showed, with startling clarity, how quickly confidence can evaporate, and how difficult it is to restore once it's gone. And perhaps that is what made Morgan so effective in that moment. He didn't just move money, he moved confidence. Every decision he made, every institution he backed, sent a signal to the market that someone was in control, that the system was not entirely adrift. In a crisis driven as much by fear as by fundamentals, that perception alone was powerful enough to slow the collapse. But it also revealed something uncomfortable, that trust in that era was not placed in systems or safeguards, but in individuals, in reputations built over decades, in a single name that could steady markets simply by stepping into the room. There is a quiet irony buried in all of this. The crisis that proved one man could save the financial system was the very event that ensured no single man would ever have to again. J.P. Morgan, the silent architect, had built the strongest possible case for his own replacement. And perhaps that is the most enduring lesson of all. Systems matter. Institutions matter. But in the end, history often turns on the actions of individuals, on their judgment, their courage, and their willingness to act when no one else can. And in the autumn of 1907, when the world of American finance stood on the edge, one man chose to act, and in doing so, changed the future of the system itself.